Here we are. We got another episode. If you are hearing this, you have once again tuned into the Consequence of Habit podcast. Your host, JT here. Hey, like always, this podcast and every other podcast is brought to you by our friends at Athletic Brewing Company. Maker of the finest NA beer on the market, in my opinion. Actually, somebody just contacted me. They said, hey, do you really like it? Do you really like the product they put out? Or is it just something, they're your sponsor, so you talk good about them? And I thought, man, I was offended. I said, if you knew how much they paid me or didn't pay me and thought that I'm willing to sell my soul for that, oof, man, well, my soul would go for a fairly small price. I talk about them because I believe in what they're doing. I believe in the mission of the company. And I believe that they're providing an alternative for people like me, people that don't drink or people that do drink, but just for whatever reason that night, they decided they want a really good beer, but they don't want the alcohol because they got something going on either later that day or the next day, and they just want to stay sharp. You don't have to compromise. You can have your amazing beer without the alcohol. So if you want to check those guys out, I encourage people to try this stuff. I'll be the first to say that if someone said when I was drinking, hey, try this non-alcoholic beer, I'd probably say, I would say no. I'm good. I appreciate it. But anyone who I've actually, even people that do drink, that I've given them an Athletic Brewing, they're always blown away by how good it is. And I can't even say it's just like beer. It's not like beer. It is really good beer. So if you want to check them out and you want to get 20% off your first order, please log on to Athletic Brewing Company and use the promo code capital COH20 and get 20% off your first order. This week on the podcast, we welcome retired Major General Greg Martin. And I'm telling you right now, ladies and gentlemen, hold on your seats for this one. Before we get into the interview, I want to set a scene for you. It's 2014. General Martin is the president of the National Defense University, the highest educational institution within the military. He gets a call from his boss to come see him in his office. His boss was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is the highest ranking military officer. I mean, full stop. That's it. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff comes around his desk, gives him a hug, tells him he loves him like a brother, but he's got until 1700 today to retire or he's fired. On top of that, he's told it's because he's suspected of having a mental illness, one that General Martin had no idea he may have. Now, this kicks off a war. This kicks off a 2-year war. Now, General Martin has been in war before, and we're going to discuss that. We're going to discuss how that plays into a possible trigger for his mental illness. But this war was one he hadn't fought before, and it almost killed him. General Martin was diagnosed with bipolar, and he is as candid as you can be about that. This idea of pulling the curtains back on some of your own struggles, especially when it comes to the struggles of the mind. This is not a popular thing within the military. Well, in society. I came upon his story when I read an opinion piece written by him and his son. And it is one of the most courageous things I can imagine somebody doing. We talk about his struggles in mental illness. We talk about what that looked like, the ups and downs. We talk about the stigma associated with it, not just in the military, but in society, in general. I'm honored to have sat down with General Martin. I'm honored for this to have been a venue for him to tell his story. And I am extremely excited to see what comes from this. Just having these conversations about mental illness, especially within the military. All right. Without further ado, please welcome to the podcast, retired Major General Greg Martin. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us. This is JT here with the Consequence of Habit podcast. We are absolutely honored to have retired Major General Greg Martin on the podcast. Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, and you have a great podcast, and I'm really thankful to be a part of it.
That's very nice of you to say. Uh, General, I came upon your story on LinkedIn, and it really hit me. There were so many aspects of it that I thought I had to reach out to you and see if we can get you on here and kind of tell your story and to spread the message of what your opinion piece in what was it? It was in Task and Purpose. Really spread that message to as many people as possible. So let's start in the beginning. Jenna, where are you from? When did you go in the military, and what was your kind of process on your way up through the ranks?
Okay, I'm from Holbrook, Massachusetts, originally, which is a little town close to Boston. And I was a walk-on to Army ROTC at the University of Maine, and that was back in 1974. And then while I was there, I applied to all the academies, and I got accepted at West Point. So I went there the next year and did the 4-year experience at West Point, which I loved it. I mean, it was, hard academics, great sports and athletics, really good military training. And the price of getting that great education is 5 years active duty in the Army. So I went out in the Army, went to Germany, combat engineer unit. And I just fell in love with the real Army. It's dirty, dangerous. I mean, it's a lot of rough characters.
Yeah.
We were doing important stuff during the Cold War, defending the border of West Germany. And I just really, really enjoyed it and stayed, got company command. And then the Army's really good at sticks and carrots. So if you're not doing very well, they beat you and kick, kind of run you out.
Yeah.
But if you're doing well, they offer you these great opportunities. So they gave me the opportunity to go to graduate school on the Army's dime and time. And so I went to grad school, got some advanced education, and then went back into the Army, as a major at that point, and then just kept going from job to job, really enjoyed it, different places, overseas, stateside, great people, challenging, a lot of travel. After the hot spot of Germany during the Cold War, which was kind of the epicenter, got to work contingency plans for Latin America, which was pretty exciting, and then also Korea. So did a lot of really, really good stuff, and then just kept getting promoted, advanced, higher level commands, and on up to the War College, and then ultimately went to Iraq as a brigade commander, and then after that made general officer.
Wow. So, I'm going to say what people are going to have already heard within the intro of why you're on and what your story is about. 2003 is when you were in Iraq, correct? You described that time in your opinion piece as just a great time in your life. Am I incorrect in saying that? Why did you say that? What was your thought process during that time? Why did that have such an impact on you? Was it just being in war, or walk us through that?
Well, I think it's a lot of things. So I was a brigade commander in 5th Corps, and which was the main effort for the attack to Baghdad. We were the main effort going up the Euphrates River Valley. So I'd been in the Army for over 20 years, and I had been in sort of low intensity conflicts and things like that, like down in Latin America. But I had never been like in a real war with, tanks and artillery and, close air support. And, this was a new experience for me. I mean, we planned and coordinated and trained, did all the administration, the logistics, deployed out of Germany into Kuwait, assembled everything in Kuwait, received units from all over the world, including allies. And I mean, it was just thrilling, invigorating. It was a high. It was just a tremendous high. I mean, also great stress, working super hard. And then the attack came. And, engineers typically in a ground attack are kind of the tip of the spear because we, punch holes through all the obstacles and create the attack lanes and all that kind of stuff. So, I was personally in charge of cutting 8 lanes through the border obstacle complex between Iraq and Kuwait.
Wow.
And I mean, that was really exciting. And, you know, artillery going overhead and everything. And so then we attacked, you know, to Baghdad. And the entire experience was just euphoric, intoxicating. I was the most up, happy, energized I've ever been in my life. I mean, I was just loving it. I mean, it was an amazing experience. And I think it was a combination of things, just, you know, the nature of being in combat, being in a war, the fact that I was a colonel and had never really been in a real war, and that we had worked so hard to prepare ourselves and to get to Kuwait. And then finally, when we attacked, it was like just joy that, oh man, you know, after all that hard work, here we are on the move. You know?
Yeah.
And so I think it was a combination of all those factors that, you know, caused me to be so up.
We'll circle back to that time here in a bit, but fast forward from 2003, you're continuing to move up within the ranks. It's at one point, were you a 2-star general at the time that you were named the president of the National Defense University? So anyone who knows the military, actually, you don't even really need to know the military, would know that at the rank of a 2-star general, you've really there's very few people that have gotten to those ranks. So to get there, there's a lot of things that you had to do right. You know, on this podcast, we talk about habits, and even reading through your opinion piece, your set of habits on the surface would seem to be those of the healthiest person. I mean, you were doing everything right. How many marathons did you run? 7 marathons. At this point, you're the president of the National Defense University, and then something happens along the way. And let's kind of bring it towards your last day there, because I think that's kind of the pinnacle, and then we'll start walking through the rest of the story.
Okay. So the way the article started off with getting called to the chairman's office?
Correct.
Okay. So middle of July, I had been the president of NDU for 2 years, and it's a really prestigious position. It's the highest level of military education in the country. And you work for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who's the #1 military officer in the country. And, you know, the month prior, things had been getting kind of rough and kind of crazy. Strange things started happening. A lot of anonymous complaints against me went into the chairman's office, saying people saying that they thought I had gone crazy, that I was nuts, that I was paranoid, that I was delusional, very erratic, not getting hardly any sleep, becoming kind of a disruption to the flow of the university, even though I had done a lot of good work and had really good ideas prior to that, but that in that past month, things had gotten kind of crazy. And then some of the people at the university were basically leaking information to certain media sources that would then write up articles about me that were real hit jobs, saying, you know, this guy is, you know, he's crazy, he's disruptive, stuff like that. So anyway, all that stuff kind of flowed into the chairman over a period of time. And he had known me. We had worked together for 17 years. He's a great leader, fabulous boss. I loved him. Probably the best boss I ever had. And we're still friends. He's a mentor. He said, you know, I have a hard time believing this because I've known Greg Martin for years and this doesn't sound like him. So he did a very professional thing. He did these independent, objective assessments where we had little teams go over to NDU and look and find out, well, what's going on? And he did he did several of them. And each one said the same thing. It said, basically, we really like General Martin. He's a fantastic guy. He's brilliant. He's had great ideas for the university. He's an inspirational leader. But something's happened to him, and he's not the same Greg Martin that I remember even just months ago. He's disruptive, he's paranoid, all the stuff I just mentioned. And and they all recommended that they all kind of gave the indication that they had lost trust and confidence in me. Now, remember, nobody knew I had bipolar disorder at this time, neither, including myself. Nobody knew, had any idea. And so General Dempsey, when he called me in, I got a phone call saying, hey, you need to come report to my office on the next workday. So I went in, and I didn't know what he wanted to see me for, because all my conversations had been extremely positive. And I didn't know if he was going to just give me advice for my third year in command, because I was going into my third year. I had put in a request for a 3-year extension. I didn't know if he was going to talk to me about the 3-year extension, or if, he might be upset because of all that I had heard the rumblings and everything. Who knows? Maybe he wants to lose. And remember, my brain was completely warped with, bipolarity. It was not working right. And so my assessment of the situation probably wasn't very good. And when I got to his office, knocked on the door, walked into the chairman's office, I saluted him. He came over and he gave me a great big hug. He's a real friendly guy. And he said, Greg, I love you like a brother, but your time at NDU is done.
Wow.
You have until 1,700 hours today to submit your letter of resignation, or I will fire you. Wow. Is that clear? And then he went on and talked for several minutes, telling me that I had done an unbelievable job. He said, you've done an amazing job. You have done more in terms of changing and transforming NDU in 2 years than most people could have done in 10 years. I give you a job grade of A+. So I think you've done A+ work, but a lot of people think you've lost it and you've become emotionally and mentally unstable. Many people think you've come down with some sort of mental illness. He said, I don't know, but I'm just telling you, they think you're mentally ill, and they've lost confidence in you. And he said, so my assessment is we can't continue this course. If your staff and faculty have lost trust and confidence in you, you're not going to be able to effectively do the mission. And the mission is important. The mission must go on. And he said, and also, if you are mentally ill, you need to get medical help. And then he said, third, I've seen general officers in your situation before where they've alienated their workforce, and typically civilian workforce, and you can't win. I mean, you'll get tied up in knots. There'll be IG complaints against you. There'll be anonymous complaints against you. There'll be press articles against you. You'll just be hit from every side. You won't know where it's coming from. You'll be totally ineffective. So he said, I'm going to do you a huge favor and just pull you out now. And so he did. Wow. And, I actually, at the time, somebody asked me, they said, well, weren't you upset and disappointed and stunned? And I wasn't, because I was acutely manic, and my brain was in a state of mania. And so I just took all this in, and I said, I'm just thinking, well, Dempsey's a great guy. I love Dempsey. Dempsey loves me. He's doing it for my own good. I'm really lucky. He's such a good guy. And I'm looking up at God. Hey, God, what's my next grandiose mission? What is it? Yeah. Give me another mission. I'm ready to go.
Right.
And that was it. And it took close to almost a month before any sort of disappointment, anger, stuff like that even started coming onto the scene in me, which tells you the power of mania, the power of these chemicals in your brain. You're not operating like a normal person. But anyway, I'll pause there and give you a chance to follow up.
Sure. In the opinion piece, you talk about some of the difficulties in diagnosing mental health issues, to the point that you actually had an evaluation, was it the week prior to this, from your general practitioner, who's also a psychologist? Am I correct in saying that?
So I went in and I got evaluated by my general practitioner and a psychiatrist.
A psychiatrist. And then after this, you go and you have another evaluation, both of which you pass.
Right.
All right. So let's walk from this point. You said a month after the fact is when this thing kind of hits you like, oh man, all of these emotions. And again, you're not, your brain is going through what it's going through, which means processing these major life things because it's very difficult. What happens from that point on? Because in the opinion piece, you talk about it was 4 months after this that you go through, you start the darkest period of your life. What was it the decision when I resigned from this position that I'm going to get out? How did that work? Or was it like a month after, like, hey, I've got something going on, I need treatment? Kind of talk about that.
Okay. So I started going into higher and higher state of mania in, 2012, 2013, 2014. By spring, summer of 2014, I was in acute mania. I mean, I was nuts. I was crazy. We can talk more about what the details of mania are, but I was completely bonkers. But I was still operating at an extremely high level. I mean, my brain was functioning. I mean, my brain was just racing with ideas and thoughts and seeing possibilities that nobody else could see. And I could articulate those things, and I didn't need sleep. I could work unending hours. And I had a lot of ideas. And so a lot of what contributed to the rise of my mania was the job at NDU. Very high pressure, high stress, tremendous resistance to the changes that the chairman, General Dempsey, and myself were trying to make. So the civilian staff and faculty resisted, for the most part, very strongly against us. And so all of that resistance and the pressure and the challenge all combined together to put huge stress on my brain, which then accelerated the mania. The mania was already underway anyhow. It had been for years, but it made it go up higher and faster. It peaked June, July of 2014. Now, I probably would have come down from that mania anyway, even if I'd have stayed at NDU. I would have naturally come down because the nature of bipolar disorder is what goes up must come down. You don't go into mania forever. You go into mania and you peak and then you come down. So I peaked. So I would have come down anyhow, probably about August regardless. But what happened was I came down slowly at first after, getting removed from the job. I came down slowly for about a month and then started going faster and faster down until Veterans Day, November 2014, I crashed. I just crashed. And so my brain had basically all that dopamine and endorphins and all that stuff that pumps you up into a high, that stopped being produced less and less and less and less and less until it wasn't producing hardly at all. And then I crashed into terrible, terrible depression. And that's what depression is. It's when your brain no longer is producing the happy drugs, dopamine, endorphins, and there's a few others. But when that happens, your brain begins to shut down and you lose interest in everything. You lose energy. You really stop functioning as a person and start thinking about death all the time. Like it just comes into your mind. You're just thinking about dying because your life is so miserable that you basically are convinced you're never going to get better. You're hopeless. And the best thing that can happen to your family and to everybody is to just die. Some people take that and they kill themselves. Other people don't. I was really lucky. I never had active suicidal ideations, but I had passive, which passive means you're thinking about how you'd be better off dead and your mind starts going through the thinking process of all the ways you can die and get killed without killing yourself. Like in a car crash, smashing into a bridge abutment, getting, thrown in front of an 18-wheeler truck,
right? Whatever.
But that's also, even though it's passive, it can become very easily an active suicidal ideation where the next thing you do is you actually really do kill yourself. But so that happened. And then that was in November of 2014. And I was just in terrible, terrible depression with delusions for almost 2 years. And during that time, I got admitted to the inpatient psychiatric ward at the VA up in Vermont. And, you know, the VA and being in the inpatient, that really helped me a lot. They were very, very good, and they did a lot of good work with me and helped me to improve.
So the reason that this story is so important, and we had a great conversation talking about it yesterday, is the stigma around mental illness. You know, we can point to the military and how it's dealt with, but I think it's with a broad stroke, we can say the stigma overall about mental illness and how it affects people, how a lot of people, even if they maybe are experiencing it, do not feel comfortable coming forward and asking for help. Did you said you didn't even really understand that you were bipolar, but in this conversation, it sounds like you kind of understood that you had highs and then you had lows, and you could almost time these. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Did you ever question that throughout this?
No.
You just thought that, hey, that's just the way General Greg Martin's brain works.
Yeah. You know, my whole life I had, you know, from as far back as I can remember, and, you know, asking people to describe what I was like. It was high energy, high enthusiasm, lots of drive, and very positive, very upbeat. And that continued, you know, through junior high, high school, West Point, early years in the Army. It wasn't probably, I didn't start getting more extreme probably until I had already been in the Army about 15 or 20 years, when, you know, you started getting flashes of anger, which is a symptomatic with mania, you know, flashes of anger, people starting to say, wow, this guy, I love him. He's really great, but he's kind of crazy. He's kind of a crazy guy. Like I did, you know, I started doing some weird things. Like, I mean, we were out on a battle staff ride, and we were in Tennessee, and we went to the Jack Daniels distillery to see. It's just, we were out there. They were right out there in the battlefield area. So anyway, we went there, and then we came back in, and it was about midnight, and I woke up all the officers, and I took them out on like a 10-mile run through the woods at midnight. And that's out there. And these guys are like, what the hell is this guy doing? And, you know, I just started doing more kind of crazy, out beyond the edge. You know, some people said, you know, we loved Colonel Martin, but he was insane. But nobody ever took it and said, wow, I wonder if there's something wrong with this guy. Even when I was at NDU and was crazy, nobody ever came to me or my wife and said, hey, we think there's something wrong. We need to do an intervention. Nobody. Now, they did do anonymous complaints, which at least got to the chairman, so he knew what was going on. But I did not know I had bipolar at all. I just knew I was high energy. And remember, going back to the Iraq War, that was where my genetic predisposition for bipolar was, according to the doctors, it was triggered, meaning I got hit with a sustained elevation of stress that the way my brain reacted to in Iraq was it just produced more and more and more of the dopamine and endorphins that it had been doing for years and years, my whole year. But it had always maybe been giving like maybe a little bit, just to kind of help me and carry me through and give me the edge, you know, just enough. But in Iraq, it gave me like that much.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it actually damages the brain circuitry. So you have these circuits inside your brain that are responsible for producing and distributing the chemicals. And so the circuits got damaged. They never went back to how they were. And so when I came back from Iraq, I plunged into really bad depression when we got back to Germany. But I didn't even know I was in depression. I didn't know what it was. During our mental health screening, I told the psychiatric people, they said, "How do you feel?" I said, "I feel terrible." They said, "What do you think's wrong?" I said, "I don't know. I feel down, depressed. Everything's dark, no energy. I don't feel like myself at all." And compared to in Iraq, when I was like up, up, up. And then they said, "Well, are you suicidal?" I said, "No." And they said, "Do you think you have PTSD?" And I didn't think I had it. And so I said, "No." And they said, "Oh, you're fine." But I wasn't fine. I was absolutely not fine.
Yeah.
I had really bad depression. And then I started doing the self-medication thing, drinking more and more and more, just because I needed something to make me feel better.
Yeah.
And so, but then the highs over the next 10 years as a general now started getting higher, and then the depression started getting lower and higher and lower until finally my brain blew up at NDU in 2014. And then it crashed into 1,000 burnt up pieces 4 months later. And then I was in absolute crisis. I mean, it was a disaster. I mean, you're in a life and death struggle at that point.
Sure.
And so anyway, how did that answer your?
No, it's answered my question and then some. And then when you talk about self-medicating, you mentioned just even through either drinking or through exercise, and maybe that was just giving you just enough of that dopamine to keep you going, because these are the things we say. Hey, if you're feeling down, which you need to get outside, get some exercise, get moving, and obviously alcohol, anything with that quick dopamine hit that it gives people, there's a reason people keep going back for it, right? So I can see how the self-medicating through exercise, through alcohol use can kind of get you until you get to that next high, and then you're off to the races again. I think the reason this story is so it's so important and it's so powerful is the fact that your entire time throughout your career, you are as hard charger as they come. So when you have this fall, it's such a dramatic fall, and it's gonna be felt and seen by so many people, that to not talk about it after the fact, to not document and walk, to put down on paper, which is the most painful things that you can possibly go through, well, then it's for nothing. The fact you do it and you put this thing out there, and explain to the listeners what the response has been since you put that opinion piece out.
Oh my God. I have gotten hundreds of responses on the piece in Task and Purpose. I've gotten, tons of emails, tons of LinkedIn messages. People have found my phone number and called me. I've gotten a whole bunch of handwritten letters that have come through the Postal Service. And, this is my mission now, to be an advocate for bipolar and mental health issues. And so I'm answering every single one. Mm-hmm. And, it's a lot of time and effort, but I believe it's worth it. Every single one has been positive and encouraging and enthusiastic and thankful. Many, many of them have related stories where the person themselves have also had a mental health crisis. And they told me their story, and it really helped them to hear me tell my story. Many of them tell the story of a spouse or a child or somebody else that's had it, and they've been affected by it. So, I mean, the reach of bipolar and other mental illnesses is absolutely huge. And, the feedback and the response has been, it's been heartwarming, and it makes me, feel good that, I'm hopefully helping people. It also confirms the data that the whole issue of mental health is so widespread. But it also makes me glad that people are not, nobody has been judgmental. Like we were talking yesterday, my guess is if we went back 20 years before 9/11 and I or someone like me wrote an article like that, I'm just going to guess that at least 50% of the responses would be very negative, very harsh, really mean-spirited, pretty ignorant, saying you're a wimp, you lack character, you don't have willpower. If you just had a positive attitude and, thought happy thoughts, you would never have had it. There's no such thing as mental illness. It's just a fabrication of the mind. It's weakness. I know people believe that because, one of my sons got bipolar really, really bad when he was in high school 20 years ago. And a lot of people, that's what they thought. And it's not true. It has never been true. But I'm glad because this now tells me we're at a point where we can really begin to cut down and abolish the stigma. Because if the response to this article was all positive, then I think the majority of people are not going to hold a stigma or enforce a stigma or think they should be ashamed or embarrassed about themselves or their child. And so to me, I'm seeing a lot of positive trends. I'm actually pretty hopeful. I've loads of my people that I worked with in the Army, bosses, peers, subordinates have reached out to me and gotten a hold of me. And they are just, they're moved, they're blown away, wow, I wish I had known. And, all very positive responses, which to me is a real good news story.
I'm going to guess one of the reasons you've gotten so many positive responses is because it's been so long and there's been so many people that haven't been comfortable coming forward or with these things, or like you said, the stigma that goes around it. After our conversation yesterday, I've been thinking, and I was thinking about the reasons. You and I were comparing mental illness to any other illness. You can have cancer, you can have diabetes, and it's looked at differently. And in my mind, I was thinking that I think it's because it comes across in behavior, and it comes across in your communication with others, and those are the things that it's very easy. And I think it's a default mode for most people to go, what are they doing? They're just not thinking right. Like they're interpreting our conversation or a situation that there's something wrong with them. And it never goes back. That empathy never goes to him and says, hey, this person is just a victim of biology. We need to help them. If he was laying there with a broken leg, we would sure as hell get some people in here and get him some help right away. And I was even thinking about, in your opinion piece, you talk about General Dempsey and you say it was the right thing at the time. And I understand that, but my initial reaction is like, it is. But if you had again, cancer or something like that, it would have been treated differently. And it's just I think we are heading in the right direction. And I'm excited about that, but I think there's quite a ways to go, and I think it's more stories just like yours that need to come out.
I think you raise a really good point that I probably haven't thought enough about. I was removed from the job. I resigned. The Army was very good to me. They said, "Hey, we don't know what this is all about. But we'll take you back from the joint world and we'll find a job for you until your programmed retirement date, which was the end of May 2015. So basically the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, wonderful guy, he said, Greg, you can either retire in 30 days or I can get a meaningful job where we need a 2-star general of your experience. And I can plug you into that, but I can only keep you on until your programmed retirement date, which was the end of May. He said, take a couple of days, think about it, decide what you want to do, and let me know. So one of the jobs that was offered was to be a special assistant over at the Corps of Engineers for a fantastic leader. So I said, hey, yeah, I'll do that job. I mean, I can contribute a lot. I don't have to retire right away. I can spend, 9 more months on active duty and get things sorted out. And that was good of them to do. But I think your point is even better. When you get cancer and you're on active duty, I've known several generals that got cancer, and they get cancer, they get the medical treatment done. They probably miss quite a bit of work. And then the Army carefully thinks about where to assign them next as a cancer survivor. And, this happens, they do it. But does that happen with someone who is a mental illness survivor? I don't think so.
Yeah.
And that is in my, I can't remember if I wrote about it in the paper, but I have a pretty good section on it in the book. The military needs to take a look at that because other professions do keep the people. There's a great professor and doctor at, I think I might have mentioned in the paper, Kay Redfield Jameson. She's at Johns Hopkins. She's like one of the best psychiatrists in the world, and she's one of the leading professors in the world. And so the hospital and the university both said, we want you, we want to keep you, we'll work with you to, manage your bipolarity, but we want you because you're so good. And so she's still there working, and her whole life she's had bipolar, and she's world famous. Can or would the military do something like that? I don't know. I'm not sure that's even on the radar screen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know because, you start mixing things like your clearances and it's tricky, right? It's a tricky, but that doesn't mean that it's undoable. And I think it's something that's definitely needs to be looked at. I talk to people in other industries like pilots. Pilots every 6 months, they have to report something, and it's the same thing. It's almost like there's a punitive effect of saying I have something going on, and it's this blanket answer to a situation. So you have something bad happen with somebody, and the root cause is mental illness, and then it's a blanket answer for everyone instead of looking at everything at an individual basis. But how painful was it for you to put these experiences on paper, whether it be in the opinion piece or in the book that is either been written or is still being written?
It's very cathartic. I like it a lot. It makes me happy.
Yeah.
There are parts of it that make me go, ooh,
yeah,
I really was nuts. I mean, I probably scared people.
Yeah.
That's troubling, but it's part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I'll tell you is when I was in the inpatient ward at the VA hospital in Vermont, it was like the first or second day, and I was completely nuts. And I told my therapist, and she was great. And, she was a real fireball. I liked working with her. I said, hey, I want to write a book and an article about my experience. And she looked at me with astonishment and said, hey, Greg, let's worry about getting you well first. like maybe, down the road sometime when you stabilize, we can talk about this. So about a month or two later, I was at another session with her and I said, hey, I want to write this book and article. And she said, okay, let me give you some advice. When you get to the point where you are stabilized and strong enough that writing makes you feel better and you want to do it. You're not doing it because you think you should or someone else tells you should. You want to do it. Then by all means do it. So that was in the spring. That was like 5 years ago. So I didn't get that urge until a year ago. My mom passed away kind of suddenly. She was 92, but it was an unexpected early death for her. And, there was the sort of the shock of it. And then doing all the funeral planning and all that was kind of like an adrenaline rush. Mm-hmm. And after I worked through all that stuff, the book boom, I started writing the book. And I've been at it for a year. And so I did the whole manuscript. I had it all done, and I sent it into the DOD for their security review for the book. And then I said, hey, I should write an article, take the whole book and boil it down to about 10 pages and see if I can get it published. And then my son was really good. He gave me a hand with it, and he's a good writer. And so we got it done. And it was very, very cathartic, very healthy. I live in Cocoa Beach, Florida, and I've met a bunch of people down here who also have, brain injuries, illnesses, mental health things. And over a period of time, it's like the people who have brain issues somehow have gathered together. And we talk about it like, hey, here's what I have. What do you have? Yeah. Blah, blah, blah. And they all were like, you need to write a book, write a book. So it's been a very rewarding experience that has helped me understand myself and bipolar disorder incredibly well, way, way beyond the level I knew it a year ago.
What strikes me is, and I hope this is the same way you feel, you go in the military to serve, right?
Right.
Your ability to serve, I think, has been amplified by this experience. Now, I don't know if that's something you didn't sign up for it. I don't know if you would have raised your hand if given the opportunity. I'm going to guess not. But it is what it is, and it's, God, man, it's an opportunity to continue to serve from here on out. Like you said, it's your full-time job now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great.
It is, I wouldn't wish bipolar on my worst enemy, and I certainly didn't ask for it and didn't sign up for it, but I have it. I went into, an absolutely acute crisis. It was a disaster. I'm always going to have it. It's not going to go away. It's in my brain, and I have it. So it's like what you said, what do you do with this? Are you going to like, oh, woe is me. I feel so bad. I got bipolar. Right. Oh, I got pushed out of my job at NDU. I'm going to feel sorry for myself, or, oh, I'm embarrassed to talk about it. I'm like, hey, I'm a soldier. I'm a warrior. I'm an airborne ranger, combat engineer. Yes. Are you kidding me? Man, I'm going to go after it, man. Yeah. And I'm like, hey, I am not embarrassed. What the hell should I be embarrassed about?
Nothing.
I'm not ashamed. Why should I be ashamed? This is stupid. Millions of people get this, and I am going to tell my story. And a lot of people have it worse than me. And a lot of people end up in jail. They get killed. They become drug addicts, whatever. I'm going to tell the story. And through, by telling my story, writing and speaking, which is basically what I'm doing now, by writing and speaking, I hope to help save lives and marriages and families and, friendships and careers and all that stuff. And I hope to help stop the stigma, which will help people to get help.
Yeah.
So that's what, and this is like my full-time job now. That's what I do.
Yeah, I believe it. And I don't think you're going to run out of work. So, what would your advice be, or what is your advice when these people are reaching out to you and you say, hey, my spouse, my family member, whoever, I'm seeing something that I recognize as possible mental health issues. What is your advice to them?
My advice would be to get medical help. The sooner the better. Bipolar symptoms, really, if you're living with or close to somebody who starts having them, if you know what they are and what they look like, and that's why I put that little piece from DSM-5, the psychiatric manual. It's not rocket science. Mania is fairly identifiable, and depression is pretty identifiable. So you kind of know what you're looking for. And if you're starting to see these symptoms, go get help.
Yeah.
Now the go get help part can be frustrating depending what, do you have the insurance? Do you have this? Do you have that? If they're backed up with patients, maybe they won't see your patient in a timely manner. So it's not an easy entrance into the psychiatric system because there's so many people who need help. But that's what I would say. Go get help and get whatever help you can get. And I think a game changer for both me and my son, who both had bipolar type 1, very acute, really serious. The game changer was getting admitted to the inpatient psychiatric ward. And a lot of people, that scares them. They think, oh my God, I don't want to go inpatient. When I had a chance and they said, hey, we want you to go inpatient, I was like, yes, yay, great. I'm going to get full time. They're going to be looking at me, the little guinea pig, full time, 24/7. And they were really, really good. And whereas if you're not inpatient 24/7, they're not looking at you as in-depth or as systematically. So short answer to your question is get medical help.
How far out from, if you start feeling something now, I mean, do you have just that much more of like an emotional awareness, like, hey, I'm feeling something and I'm able to figure this out or at least raise my hand for help? Or what's the situation now? Like you said before this, it wasn't even something you recognize you had. What are the warning signs that you start seeing now?
For me, okay,
yeah.
So I'm in the article I called it, I'm in a forever war. I mean, the war is never going to end. I mean, it's like I may say, hey, I feel good. I don't have bipolar anymore. I can do whatever I want, and but the bipolar doesn't do what you do. The bipolar has a vote, and it can come roaring back in like a lion and just kick your ass anytime it wants. And so you have to be vigilant. You have to be self-aware. So a lot of what I've done is study the symptoms. I mean, I have a monthly, meetings with a psychotherapist who are very good. I read stuff. And my wife is very smart on this now too. So she knows the symptoms and knows my personality. So like in the past, I'm still a pretty enthusiastic, pretty high energy guy with a lot of drive. However, we can detect when I start going into hypomania, which is a low level of mania that's still dangerous, that can easily go into mania. And once you go into mania, I mean, the horses have left the barn. You go into mania, anything can happen. Chances are the mania is going to go acute, and then you're going to fall into severe acute depression again. That's probably what's going to happen. So, and then depression, the other thing that can happen, the mania, it can be sparked through lack of sleep, drinking too much, drugs, agitation, anger, frustration, rage. So there's certain things that I now know cause me to go into a happy hypomania. Like what they are, it's dancing, music, singing, karaoke. Like I've got this little group of friends down here that I like. They're fun, and sing, dance, karaoke, and it revs me up. And you just got to be careful it doesn't go too much.
Sure.
But then on the other side of going into mania is agitation, frustration, anger. And those can come, for me, I know where they come from. There's certain sources, there's certain people and certain topics and certain issues that if I am not careful and I start getting enmeshed in those and I'm in the close fight slugging it out, it revs me up and I get angry. And the anger can also lead to mania.
Yeah.
So mania is not always, a lot of people think mania is just you go high and you're happy, happy, happy. Well, that is part of it. But another part of mania is anger, rage, violence, bad stuff. So what do? I've had these talks with my therapist. She's a psychologist at the VA. And by the way, I love the VA. They've been, I know somebody wrote you a question on the VA, but anyway, and my wife is smart on this. So I know what those danger activities and people and issues are. So I build guardrails around them. Like I just build little guardrails and I don't go there. Like there was a particular club I was going to associating with the people and I liked them, but issues would come up that would infuriate me. And so I just stopped going. I don't go. I don't have anything against the people. They're nice people. I'm still friends with some, but I don't go there and interact because it'll put me in a bad place. There's other people who, if I work on projects or issues with them, it'll do the same thing. Bad, bad, bad. And the karaoke and stuff like that, I just got to be careful that I don't go too crazy.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Have other people that you've been around who've read the opinion piece or know the book that's coming out or have been informed of the battle you've been through, have they reached out with some empathy and with more of an understanding, like, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. I don't take things personal now that it goes back to me. I think with the stigma is when you're talking about these interpersonal relationships and what mental illness can do to somebody, people take things very personally. And until they know that there's something else going on, that this is a chemical thing, this is an actual, like I said, a victim of biology, that's when I think the empathy comes and people are way more understanding. So going back to the question, have people reached out to you from your past military experience, even people within your family that you may or may not have had a conflict with?
Yes. Yeah. People really have reached out, and it's been, very heartening. And, the bottom line, most of them say is, hey, I had no idea. You were always high energy, but I didn't associate anything with bipolar. Thanks for sharing this. It's very courageous. It's going to help people. A lot of people have these problems, but they don't talk about it because of the stigma. Now you can help break through the stigma and, set a tone where people who do have mental health issues go get the help they need, which is a good thing. So people have been really, really positive.
Yeah.
And how many people that I served with and knew who tell me, oh man, I had bipolar, but I had to hide it.
Yeah.
I had really bad depression or PTSD, but I hid it because if I didn't, I would have gotten kicked out. And so I struggled. I went to a psychiatrist, in the civilian world, paid for it out of pocket because I didn't want the military medical people to know. So there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
The other thing that is kind of cool, in Cocoa Beach, which is kind of a fun, cool town. I've told a bunch of people and talked to them about it and given them, drafts of my manuscript and the article and all that kind of stuff. And they're, 100% accepting, like, oh wow, yeah, hey. It's just like, it's no big deal. Hey, thanks for telling me. That's really great. Like, there's no, ooh, this guy's spooky, I better stay away from him.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm like I said, I think it's exciting times. I've had other veterans on the podcast, and this isn't necessarily a bipolar, but it's under the the umbrella of mental illness. And some of the things that people are doing now that, a couple of years ago, probably people would have thought about, as far as just even a self-maintenance, a mental health aspect. So, things like meditation and breath work, and obviously things like exercise have been around for some time. And I want to be clear that these things do not stop bipolar, right? You could have meditated every day for half a day. That doesn't change anything. But I do think some of the points that you brought up, even in being in war in 2003, of recognizing, bam, I'm on cloud nine and I'm here. I don't need sleep. These are right. These are signs that something's not right. Like, this is not how the normal human being is processing stress and so I think it's an exciting time. Have you thought about, they come to you tomorrow, they say, General Martin, we want you to help rewrite the way the DOD is looking at these things. Have you contemplated on what that would start to look like, or at least some suggestions to them?
Not that much, because I've really, really been focused for the past year on my book. And, I'm going to send it off to my literary agent next week. So hopefully it'll get picked up by a publisher. So given how much I've been working on the book and then the article, I really haven't had time to think about it other than just the general question, hey, can the military adopt some kind of a policy like academia, the medical profession, like Professor Jameson, and, just use that as a way to open the discussion. But that's about it.
Yeah.
However, I will say I'm starting to get invitations to, in addition to your great podcast, some pretty high-level medical officials have asked me to come speak at a few different conferences. And so I think, and then I've got another link to work with a guy who's in charge of a lot of the brain science stuff for DOD. So as I start associating with those people and they read the article and, my book, maybe I'll get invites like that to, and I would be delighted to serve and do what I can to help. When I finish this book, I do have 3 more articles and or books in my mind by theme, but different aspects of it.
Yeah.
So
interesting. Well, sir, one of the things we spoke about before we hit record, and I know it's something that you wanted to make sure we hit, is just to let everybody know that this mental illness doesn't care what color you are. It clearly doesn't care what rank you are, right? It doesn't care what your tax bracket is. That this is all inclusive, man. Everyone can come, be really a victim of this. And I think the fact that we say the word general before your name is what really is going to give this a lot. It gives a clout. It gives it where people can look and say, "Hey, man, this guy is as high up as you can pretty much go." And he's still willing to come out and talk about this. So, I applaud you. I think it's fantastic. I think it's just an amazing opportunity, like I said, to continue to serve and continue to help soldiers, help everybody.
I totally agree. I got a really, really encouraging note from a retired 4-star who, he's a fire-breathing cavalryman, and he said, "Hey, this is amazing that you're doing this. You're really continuing to serve. You're continuing to be a soldier, a warrior. You're going to help tons of people. You have my admiration." And and it's coming from lots of people. And these guys are killers. Right. These are serious killers, and they're like, "Hey, this is good stuff."
Yeah.
So I feel like it's it's a whole new life that I've been given to live, to serve and help other people. First off, serving military, because I can tell you there's a lot more bipolar disorder going on in the U.S. military than anybody knows. And I can come back and tell you why if you want to know. Number 2, the veteran population. It's huge. There's the 700,000 veterans being treated for bipolar disorder. How do you go from hardly any in the serving military to 700,000 veterans? That tells me that there's probably a lot of unreported bipolar disorder in the serving military, active guard and reserve. And then thirdly, the general population is huge. The studies, it's between 5 and 10 million people with diagnosed bipolar. One study says 4% of the American population. One study says that there's probably 10 million with another 10 that aren't diagnosed or don't know they have it. So it's a huge problem. And then you look at the problem of unipolar depression is vastly higher than bipolar disorder. That is just unipolar depression is just a terrible, terrible affliction. And then there's schizophrenia, and then there's PTS, and there's all kinds of stuff. One study I saw shows that of the U.S. population, 330 million people, everybody, 100%, either have a mental disorder, or they have a family member or a friend or a work colleague So everybody is affected in
Sure.
some significant way by a mental disorder or mental illness. And the problem is huge. It's very poorly understood. A big part of the feedback I got in the article was people said, wow, this really helped me understand bipolar disorder. I didn't really understand it before. Like now I feel like I understand it pretty well. So we got to do better job of educating people. And I think the more people that can write their story in non-technical scientific speak, it will help people understand more. But the cost in terms of human cost, economic cost to the society are enormous. And I think the big thing is stop the stigma. I mean, if we can stop the stigma, people will go get help. These are manageable medical conditions. I am managing I have really bad bipolar. I'm managing it. I'm taking the right meds. I'm doing all the right stuff. I'm living a great life. I'm having fun.
Yeah. 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 Well, that was,
my wife likes me. Laughs at my jokes.
There you go. Yeah. I think one of the important things in the article is it's not just, hey, I have bipolar and I suffered through this and that's it. It's no. It may not feel like it for a good part of this, but there is light at the end of the tunnel and there is things you can do about it. And here's another example of somebody living with it who's still excelling and living a great life. So, yeah, I think it's an important part of the story.
One little point that I talk about in the article a little, my bipolar disorder helped me until it didn't. I had that excess of the good chemicals gave me extra energy, drive, enthusiasm, intelligence, creativity, and it gave me a biochemical advantage over my peers until it didn't. Yeah. Until the chemicals were too much and they caused, it to go the wrong direction. And then, of course, when you no longer have those chemicals, then you're at a huge disadvantage compared to anybody. But that's, one of the hard things about bipolar is the traits that we talked about, energy, drive, et cetera, those could either be just the healthy personality traits of a talented person, or they could be the forerunners of coming down with real bipolar. And nobody knows. You don't know what the answer is. Like in my case, we didn't know even for 11 years later. We didn't know. And I mean, the real bipolar, no kidding, came out in 2003 in Iraq, but I didn't get diagnosed till 2014. So how many years is that? 11 years.
Too many.
And it's tricky. One of the reasons I think the military has more bipolar than they may think is that what kind of people does the military want? Energy, drive, motivation. That's what they want. That's who they're recruiting. So you get this abundance of young men and women coming in with all of those potential pre-bipolar traits. Number two, how old are the recruits coming in?
18, 19 years old.
18, 19, up to about 25, 26. Guess what the prime bipolar years are? Right there. So you're getting the right DNA pool at the right age for a critical mass of bipolar. And I don't know what the stats are. I don't know what the military says about itself, what it thinks about itself. But I wonder in my own mind now, how many of those crazy troops who get in trouble, who get in fights, who get in car crashes, who get arrested, who, do crazy, excuse me, you might have to edit that out. And how many of them have gone into mania of some type, an agitated state of mania?
Generally, you're taking somebody who's 18, 19 years old, who all of those things you described. And then on top of that, they're since 9/11, they're being exposed to trauma. They're being exposed to these adrenaline dumps like you mentioned. A lot of these guys, their frontal cortex hasn't even fully developed yet. They're seeing death. They're seeing things that it's not natural to see on a regular basis. And then we wonder why we have the issues that we do. I mean, if anything, I think COVID-19, there's been more incidents of people that maybe been on that threshold of mental illness that have certainly gone over. I mean, you see the rates of alcoholism, substance misuse overall, domestic violence. I mean, this has triggered a lot of things in a lot of people. Now you take these 18, 19-year-old men and women and you throw them in war. And then I completely agree. I think this problem is much bigger. I think it's one of the reasons you're getting the reactions that you're getting. And I think if I think it's gonna be a can of worms that hopefully, they're going to start looking at it a little closer. So when's the book? We're waiting. What's the date? Do you think you said you're putting this out there? And
I'm hoping I'm hoping it will be published and on the street by Christmas.
That'd be great.
So it goes to my literary agent. I'm going to get it to her next week, and she'll take it and do her magic. She's got some publishers she typically works with. She's real confident that it's going to do well, and then she does her thing. And this is all new to me. Hey, I got to tell you how I got this publisher. This is pretty cool. Because when I first started, I had the book sort of drafted. And I'm like, okay, now how the hell do I get it published? So I'm looking online and talking to people and calling people and all that sort of stuff. And I gave a draft to my son, and he gave it to his battle buddy from the Army. They had been in Okinawa together. And the guy is a sergeant first class retired, Green Beret. And he read it. He said, oh my God, he was blown away. And he has started a foundation called Dinner Table that is all about helping the invisible wounds of war. I started in the SOF community out at Fort Lewis, but now he's spread around. And so people with all kinds of, mental brain stuff. And so he told his mother, he said, hey, Mom, you got to check this out. Read this. So he sent it to her. And so she read it and said, I want to talk to this guy. And it turns out she is a very experienced, heavy hitter literary agent. And so she calls me on the phone, said, General Martin, I want to be your agent. And I said, okay, sounds good to me.
Sold.
But it was from two NCOs, working it with, his mother. So she's been good to work with. I mean, knows what she's doing. So I think she'll do a good job.
I mean, that in itself, your son was SF, correct? I mean, you talk about just some snake eating, hard charging bad dudes, and they're reading these things. Your son has suffered himself through this. And they're reading these things going, man, this is, if they're giving this the respect that it deserves, then anybody should. If you're giving it the respect it deserves, then anybody should. No one can ever say this is a weak-minded. This is coming from some of the strongest-minded people out there. But all right, so we're hoping by Christmas, man. I would love to have you back on when this thing hits the shelves. I would love to have you back on, and we'll really get it out to as many people as possible. I'm excited to see what the future holds for General Martin. I see a lot of impact.
Thank you. Thanks, JT.
Yeah. I think that's all I've got. If you've got something else you would love to cover, then just let me know.
JT, this has been great. I really appreciate it. I applaud you for doing this podcast. It's really good. I went back through and looked at, all the people you've had on. Really impressive. And I feel honored and privileged to be among such an illustrious cast.
Oh, sir, the honor is all mine. Let's do it again sometime.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. That's it for me. Please rate this podcast. Not just this one, all of them in general. That would be great. Leave a review. A couple stars would be nice. And thanks again to retired Major General Greg Martin. This one was special for me. You know, every interview I do is unique, and I really just appreciate anyone who comes on and tells their story. But there's sometimes I walk away from one of these, and man, I'm just honored to have even been a small part of just a venue for someone like General Martin to come on here and tell his story. So thank you very much to Major General Greg Martin. And with that, I will see you all next week.